Strategic planning means different things to different people, and depending on the size and type of the organisation, a strategic planning process can look really different. So in this video, I cut through all of the fancy jargon and the complex corporate speak, and I simply give you 6 steps that you can walk a group through so they end up with a usable strategic plan. Hi, I'm Kerry Price. I'm the founder of the Facilitators Network, and I use the principles of deliberate generosity to make sure that no meeting or workshop is ever wasted. I've been a professional facilitator for 20 odd years, and in that time I've led thousands of meetings, workshops and community conversations. Now I help other trainers and facilitators do it well too. Before you go anywhere in a strategic planning workshop or a strategic planning process, you need to make sure that you and the group are all on the same page. So step 1 in a strategic planning workshop is to actually define the process. When I'm working with groups around strategic planning, the first thing I do is invite people to share what strategic planning means to them. You have 10 people in the room and they're all going to come up with a slightly different answer. I explain that my version of strategic planning is about coming up with a big picture, future-focused plan that provides direction for every decision the organisation is going to make. Now that in itself is a reasonably clear definition, but it still doesn't help with what are the steps and what are we actually going to do today. So I often explain to groups that strategic planning or a strategic plan is a bit like a pizza. The pizza base represents the foundations of your plan. That represents your vision, your mission, your purpose. It tells the world that you are a pizza. This is what you're all about. The pizza sauce represents your organisation's values. So while there might be lots of pizzas on this planet, the sauce you put on it is your values. It tells people the unique flavour that your organisation brings to the pizza. The next part of the pizza is the ingredients. You might have chicken or bacon or onion or tomato, and over time those ingredients might change. Those represent the key vehicles that you'll use to drive your business. It might be your key income streams or the key areas or sectors within your business or organisation. The ingredients you put on now might change later, but they still have to make sense to be on a pizza with your particular flavoured sauce. Next comes the pizza oven, the sharp knives, the expert pizza chef. Those are the critical success factors. That's what you need to have in place in order to create the pizza that you want. And in terms of strategic planning, that's all the things you need to have in your business to build the organisation you have envisaged. And lastly, it's the cheese on top. The cheese represents your strategic goals, and it's your goals that tie the rest of the pizza or the rest of your strategic plan together. I intentionally describe strategic planning or a strategic plan as something like a pizza so that we can let go of all the fancy jargon. I don't care whether they call the pizza base a vision, a mission or a purpose. I don't care whether they call the cheese strategic goals or strategic objectives. What it's sharing is that really there's just a few things we need to have in place. We need to know what we do and why we do it. We need to know what our values are or the specific flavour we bring to the organisation. We need to know what our key business streams are or the key focus areas. We need to know what we need to have in place in order to bring that to life. And lastly, we need to put some goals or objectives in place so that we can measure that as we go along. The language doesn't matter, it's just like building a pizza. Step 2 is to define the vision, mission and purpose. And at this point, I encourage organisations not to get hung up on the language. I once sat in a strategic planning session where we spent 2 hours arguing over whether something was a vision or a mission. And honestly, people, it doesn't matter. This part of the step is just getting clear on What is the big picture thing that we do, and why is it that we do it? So for example, in my business, the Facilitators Network, I provide training and support to trainers and facilitators so that no meeting or workshop is ever wasted. So the mission I'm on, the thing I'm doing, is providing training and support, and the vision, what will become a reality if I do that well, is there won't be a meeting or workshop on the planet that ever goes to waste. A useful question to ask organisations or teams when they are shaping out their vision, mission and purpose is, if your organisation was doing everything 100% right, what would your community look like as a result? This takes it away from being, I want to be a multi-million-dollar business, or I want to be the best at, and gets to the heart of why they're doing what they're doing. Step 3 is to identify the organisation's values. And this is a really important part of the strategic plan that often gets missed. The values piece tells the organisation not just what they're doing, but how they go about doing it. So for example, with the Facilitators Network, our 3 core values are generosity, excellence, and authenticity. So if I'm ever stuck deciding what should I be doing in this situation, what decision should I make right now, I ask myself, what is the most generous thing I could do? What is the most authentic thing I could do? And what is the thing that would take this to the next level of excellence? The same is true for the organisations that you're working with. Values become a filter for decision making. When supporting organisations to identify their values, I often use these being cards. You can use them in a whole ton of different ways, but what I will often do is invite organisations to take the pack of cards, lay it out on the table, and then start to sort them from most important to least important. If you're working with 8 or 10 people in the room, this can get a bit chaotic. So start by inviting people to do it on their own, then match up with a peer, and then into small groups, and slowly but surely those 3 or 4 or 5 most important values will rise to the top. Okay, so we've done step 1, which is to describe the process. Step 2 is to identify the vision, mission, purpose. Step 3, identifying the values. And step 4 is for the organisation or the team to decide what are the key vehicles we'll use to achieve this vision. And this looks different for different types of businesses or organisations. When it comes to the Facilitators Network, we have 5 key income streams or 5 business focuses. We have our annual Facilitation Festival, which is a bit like a conference. We have our online community where people support each other in this space. I run public workshops, I run contracted in-house workshops, and I do facilitation mentoring. Those are the 5 vehicles that we use to achieve the vision or mission that we've set out. And the same goes with the organisations that you're working with. They need to think about what are the key vehicles that they have in place and how will they help achieve the vision, mission or purpose that they have set. And the same goes with the organisations that you're working with. You need to help them identify their key vehicles or key business streams. And then it's about thinking, which of these business streams do we want to grow? Which do we want to stop or slow down? Which do we want to continue business as usual? And are there any that we would like to start? Are there some new initiatives or projects or vehicles that we'd like to use going forward? Now, deciding on these things is not quite as simple as I think this is a great idea. You need to take them through a process around what's working well, what's not working well, how is the environment outside of the organisation changing, what are the strengths and weaknesses within the organisation itself, what other opportunities might exist. There's a whole lot of different processes you can use in this space, but a SWOT analysis or a PESTEL analysis are a good place to start. At the end, You just want them identifying which streams we're going to grow, slow, stop, or start. Step 5 is to identify the critical success factors. Or in other words, if we're going to make this vision a reality, and we're going to use these key business areas or income streams to achieve that thing, what do we need to have in place to make sure that that can happen? And it might be things like, wow, our staff really need to be upskilled in a particular area. Or, geez, we really need to buy a building rather than lease a building. Or perhaps we need to get much better with marketing. All of these things might be important, but what happens at this stage is deciding which of these critical success factors the organisation needs to focus on in the coming year, 2-year, 3-year, 5-year. What this does is it means instead of scattering their time, energy and resources on all sorts of different things, they can be really deliberate about where they put their focus. Step 6 is to set some strategic goals. And this is the piece that pulls all of the things together. You reflect on, this is our vision, mission, or purpose. So this is what we're about and what we're ultimately trying to achieve. We think about the values and how we'll go about achieving that, the characteristics that we will bring to the table. You've helped them decide on which are the key income streams or focus areas for the business and what they're going to grow, slow, stop and start. And you've talked about what you need to have in place in order to make all of that a reality. Strategic goals are about creating some milestones and some direction so that you can actually know whether you're on track. So instead of just setting a strategic plan for 5 years and checking back in at year 4.5, this is about setting milestones along the way so you can see how you're progressing towards what you're ultimately trying to achieve. Of course, at every step in this process, you need to wrangle a whole bunch of different voices and you need to get them to agree, which requires some specific decision-making tools and techniques. In my next video, How to Facilitate Group Decision-Making, I give you a bunch of different frameworks that make it easy to take lots of ideas and narrow it down so that a group can find consensus or alignment on what happens next. You can find the link in the description below. Go check it out.